Hey guys, it's Melissa here from melissaoatman.com. Welcome to another episode of Awaken Your Inner Awesomeness. I am so delighted you're here with us today. We have a very special guest. Today we have with us Mr. Phill Webster. He is an actor turned author who wrote the book Letting Glow, and he is getting ready to release a new book, Glowing Deeper. And today he's here to talk to us about his spiritual journey and how he went from acting to then writing a book about everything he's been through. So I cannot wait to hear his story. I want to thank you guys for being here with us today. And Phil, I want to thank you for being here with us today as well.
Thank you very much for having me on. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, so your story sounds really fascinating. You're an actor and it sounds like you've also done, quite a lot of other things like many of us have on our journeys trying to figure out, who we are and what we want to do in life. And somehow this led you to writing a book about your journey. So I'd love for you just to tell us a little bit about who you are and your book and what it's all about.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So yeah, I grew up in the UK. In my 20s, I kind of felt desperate to get out of the UK and went traveling a lot. And I was abroad for about 20 years. I came back in my 40s, 2017, and pursued acting and just kind of paid the bills with it for a few years. It wasn't kind of like I was just kind of trying to be honest with myself about what would I like to do, and I wanted to do something creative. It wasn't really from a need to perform or anything like that. But I wasn't under any illusions about it. And like I say, just sort of paying the bills was kind of like a measure of success for me. And then of course COVID came along, and things went quiet for a while. So my mum, the story of where the book comes from was essentially to do with the grieving process and something that happened around when my mum passed. So she lived on her own on a place called the Isle of Wight. I'm based in London, and she was about maybe 2, 3 hours away, something like that, and a short boat trip. So obviously through COVID, she was 76 years old, so she was in the vulnerable category and all that kind of thing. So we were, adhering to the guidelines and the restrictions and all the rest of it. And I would go and see her when I could, trying to do the right thing. I guess none of us really knew what was happening in that year. But I hadn't seen her for a while. She'd been on her own for pretty much the whole of 2020, and it just turned to 2021. And I hadn't seen her at Christmas, hadn't seen her for a few months. And we would FaceTime every day, and I would sort of check on her. But she was getting like increasingly lonely and somewhat depressed. She had sort of various age-related health problems like high blood pressure and a heart condition, but she'd always bounce back from these things, So I kind of expected her to be around for a few years. But anyway, we talked on this particular evening, maybe 9:30 at night, something like that. And I think we'd spoke a couple of times already that day. Um, and yeah, so I hit her up on the on the FaceTime call. And when she answered, there was a man beside her, and I was kind of taken aback because we were in a lockdown. And I saw him long enough that I could describe him. He had thinning gray hair, glasses, kind of a gaunt face. And as she kind of moved the phone, he went out of shot. And I said, "Well, who's that?" And she said, "Who's what?" And I was like, "Well, the guy. I just saw somebody standing beside you." And she said, "No, there's no one here." And she sat down, and I was like, I came home. I said, "Sorry, I just saw someone. So, who was it? And again, I sort of must emphasize like where she lived was a very rural place. There was, I knew all the neighbors. It was a very quiet place. And there shouldn't have been anyone there. It was 9:30 at night and we were in a lockdown. And she kind of just dismissed it and sat down and started telling me about her day. And I think I interrupted her a couple of more times because I'd just seen the guy, and she just dismissed it. And I usually could tell if there was someone with her, all through the years, she would put on like a lot of airs and graces. Like if there was somebody with her and she was on the phone, she would start speaking more politely and wouldn't be herself. And it used to be like really annoying, And she wasn't doing any of that. And we talked for nearly an hour. And I thought, well, I guess I was mistaken, And we ended the call. I went to bed. And then the next morning I got the phone call that the neighbors couldn't get in, and my mum was having a heart attack, and she passed away that morning. So through all the grief, over the following months, really, my mind just sort of did keep going back to that. I was like, well, what was that? What are we talking here? And I got to say, my mind wasn't really at that point in life with the esoteric or anything like that. In that period, although I'd had kind of years where I was interested in that when I was younger, but I was living a very practical life and I wasn't really thinking about any of that stuff. And I was thinking, well, what are we talking here? Are we talking spirit guides or what? And I would tell people on occasion, and I'll get mixed responses depending on people's beliefs. Some people were like, okay, well, that was clearly a sign. And then others were sort of just dismissive and saying, well, you're grieving. And it's like, well, I wasn't grieving because it was before the fact. But anyway, I kind of get it. And I didn't really know what to do with it. And also, it wasn't like I recognized the guy. He didn't look like an uncle or somebody that had passed away or something like that. So it wasn't even particularly comforting. It was just, I was like, okay, well, what was that? Right. But anyway, through the following months, I was working on a film, one of these big Marvel superhero movies, and I eventually told somebody about it, and she was like, "Oh, you should ask for a sign." So I've got another quick story. I'll just quickly tell you that before we go
Yeah,
into
absolutely.
um into it any further. And I was like, okay, sure, let's try this asking for a sign thing. So this is kind of like 2 months down the line, and I just kind of started opening up to people. I hadn't spoke to anyone on this film set for like 2 months. I was just burying my head in books and just crying at random places throughout the day. And I was there, but I really wasn't present. I was just it was a horrific time. And anyway, so myself and my partner, we just moved into a new apartment. And I was packing stuff away, and I had a lot of Blu-rays. They're kind of useless now, but I had all these Marvel movies, these superhero stupid things that I liked them at the time. Since working on one, completely lost interest in them. But I was like, as I was doing that, I thought, all right, let's do this. And I was like, okay, Mom, if you're around, can you give me a sign? And then I sort of forgot about it, continued putting these Blu-rays away. And then I noticed that one was missing, and the one that was missing was Doctor Strange. So I was working at the time on the sequel to that movie. I was working on Doctor Strange 2, like every day, and every morning when I'd walk there, I was speaking out loud to my mum, saying, "Hey, Mum, I'm doing this. I'm on this movie," and just talking out loud to her as though like I would if I was on the phone to her. And I was like, well, how odd that that one's missing out of all of them. The one movie that's missing is connected to the film that I'm working on like every day for about 4 months at the time. Anyway, I kind of forgot about it and I went about tidying up the rest of the flat. And a couple of hours later, this Blu-ray was just sitting on top of a pile of books. And I was like, well, that it shouldn't have been there. All the rest of them have been in the same box. So I went over to pick it up and I noticed the title of the book underneath was poking out. And I could see the author's name, and it said Maureen, which was my mum's name. And the book beneath that one, part of the title of that one was poking out, and it said Living. So I got Doctor Strange, Maureen, and Living about an hour or so after I'd asked for a sign. So I was like, okay, all right, let's maybe look into this then,
Yeah.
and I kind of went from there. So I'll stop talking. Sorry, I'm just rambling. But yeah, that was kind of my, I suppose, reintroduction to looking into spiritual ideas. Yeah.
That's fascinating to me. I get chills thinking about the fact that you saw something. And I believe in that, of course.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people who, I always call it a spiritual awakening, like when you're reintroduced to, because I think that happens to a lot of us. Maybe we are
Yeah.
religious when we're young, or we have a connection, and then we're learning, we're figuring out who we are, we kind of step away from it for a while.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
then something happens in our lives that draws us back in. And for a lot of people, that is loss, whether
Yeah.
it's the loss of a relationship, the loss of a job, loss of a person. And that is true for me. And I lost my mom 2 years ago, too. So I understand
I'm sorry.
the grief
Yeah.
and the journey, and how difficult that can be. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that's fascinating. So this sort of got you questioning then. Okay. So did you ask for more signs?
Well, yeah. Another thing that it also did, which kind of ties into what you said there, was it made me look back on other stuff that had happened over the years and stuff that I'd dismissed, and I'd had a couple of really profound, big moments that I'd sort of just put behind me, and I thought, well, I don't know what that was, and I don't want to deal with it, you know. And also down to sort of more, I don't know, I suppose you could say lighter stuff that happened when I was a kid, you know, that again, I was like, did that really happen, or is it just a kid's imagination that I just
Hmm.
forgot about? But then I started thinking, oh, well, what if all these things were actually a thing? And it would seem that every few years something would happen. And one of the biggest things that happened was in my mid 30s, I woke up one morning, and I was living in Helsinki at the time. I was living a bit of a hedonistic lifestyle. I was running bars and nightclubs. I wasn't a terrible person, but I was kind of very self-absorbed. I definitely wasn't thinking about anything spiritual at all. I was just kind of in this pursuit of having what I thought was fun at the time. And being a bit selfish. And anyway, I kind of woke up this morning, and I just had this odd thought, and it wasn't like a new thing, but it something shifted. And I was just thinking about how we've only really got the moment of now, you know, all the time. Um, and as I thought about this, it was as though were hit with like a ton of bricks, and all of a sudden it was as though I were over here looking at my thoughts, and linear time fell away, and it was just like now. But then it just didn't stop. It was like now, now, now. I just couldn't switch it off. I couldn't think, well, what am I going to do tonight, or eat for dinner, or what did I do last night, or all of a sudden it seemed absurd. You know, I was thinking, okay, what, this sounds kind of nuts, but like I was like, well, this moment now, where's it gone? You know, we assume that it's behind us, it's on this timeline, but where is it? It's nowhere to be found, you know. Um, and I kind of flew into a panic attack. And I tried to walk it off, and then I went to work that night, and I was kind of really freaking out about this. And you know, no drugs or alcohol was involved or anything like that. I was just having a real freak out, and I was trying to tell people about it, and they were just looking at me like I was nuts, which was fair enough. And I thought it would stop, and it didn't stop. It went on for weeks, to the point that I started thinking, like, doubting my sanity. It was as though reality had shifted, and I just couldn't switch the thing off. It was just like ultra awareness, you know. I can't really, and terrifying. You know, people talk about being in the moment of now, and what a wonderful experience it is, and Eckhart Tolle writes about it and things like that. But it was horrifying. The experience that I think I was having the exact polar opposite to what he's talked about. Although I haven't actually read his books, but um, it got to a point where I went to see a doctor, and they started using words like psychosis, and gave me meds which didn't touch it. You know, just nothing happened. Like anti-anxiety pills, nothing touched it. They gave me sleeping pills. I'd wake up the next day, the whole thing would just start over again. I would just be this now, now, now. Couldn't switch it off. And eventually, like months in, I was getting to like a very sort of dark place, thinking, well, something's broken here. You know, I was seriously thinking, well, this is the way that my brain's going to work now. I'm going to check out. Like I didn't see any tragedy in it. And just sort of just to remind, this is I was about 35 years old, so a good 10, 13 years ago. Um, and I really just didn't know what to do. I felt like I was kind of hanging on to reality by like the slippery pole, you know. Eventually I found a therapist, and I told him this whole thing, and he was amazingly the one person that seemed to know exactly what I was going through. And he was like, no, 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 man. He was like, you're fine. It's like this is an awakening. You know, he said, you're experiencing ultimate reality. And he led me through a guided meditation, which pretty much after a good couple of months brought me back almost instantly. It kind of started up again afterwards, but I started practicing this meditation every day, and very gradually sort of came back online or offline, depending on which way you look at it.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, okay, thank God, and just put it behind me, and just didn't want to, you know, I was like, I don't know what the hell that was. But again, in hindsight, you know, maybe that was something more powerful than I was kind of giving it credit for. And I'm not dismissing mental illness or anything like that, but you know, what medication couldn't do, meditation did essentially. That's quite I should have used that for a tagline
Yeah.
in the
Great
book.
tagline.
But just point being, and sorry to I'm sort of backtracking, but yeah, point being, it would seem that every few years something like that would happen. You know, there was a couple of instances, but I won't, more instances, but I won't sort of go too far into it. But I thought, all right, well, maybe I need to start taking notice of this stuff. I started writing the book about losing my mom and the grieving process, and then all these little signs that I seem to be getting. And I read a book about mediumship by a medium called Claire Broad, and another strange little synchronicity. So I think I'm getting joined by a cat here. Um, was that I just picked up this book on mediumship. I didn't know where the author was from, Claire, and the first story started in a place called Richmond Cemetery, and it was kind of where she first had like a psychic impression when she was a kid, and I could see it out of my window. I could see Richmond Cemetery from my window, and Claire could have been from the States or Australia or anywhere. I had no idea. And oddly, this book took place right across the street out of my window in London. Anyway, I ended up getting in touch with Claire, doing a couple of workshops and things like that, and essentially exploring mediumship. And to sort of cut the story short of the first book, it's essentially like my journey into learning about mediumship and different spiritual practices.
So, have you found, since you had the experience with when you were talking to your mother and you saw someone or you saw something and you weren't sure what it was in the background, have you had any experiences similar to that since then?
I haven't had any actual visual. Well, actually, yeah, I did once. Oh, that's another story entirely. But nothing like that. Nothing. I've never seen a visual apparition. I suppose that's what it was. I still don't know what it was. What was it? Was it her spirit guide? Was it my spirit guide? Was it a family member? I don't know. A friend of hers. I believe it was something. And at the end of the day, that seemed to me to be the most logical. The most logical option. Despite what some people said, I know that there wasn't. I knew her daily routine. I knew what she did all the time, so I'm convinced that there was nobody physically with her. But no, I haven't actually had like a sort of representation like that through learning about mediumship, sitting in a circle and all that stuff. I've definitely given people messages and seen people in my mind's eye, but nothing physical. I don't know how it is for other mediums. Mediums often talk about, well, you've got this person standing beside you. I don't know if they're actually standing beside them. That's not how it's worked for me, at least. I'll sort of, yeah, I'll get the impression of feeling,
Mhm.
sometimes even the feeling of a description rather than actually seeing someone. But anyway, it's kind of early days for me. I'd say I'm sort of about 2.5 years into it, so I'm not really considering myself as a medium yet. I'm not even sure that that's sort of my final destination. I feel like it's just part of it. But yeah, I've had some amazing things happen. And seeing other mediums at work, just heard amazing stories, that are absolutely something that they couldn't know, and same for myself, giving people evidence that like no idea where this came from. Yeah. So yeah, it was kind of an interesting way to write a book because I was pouring my grief into it, but at the same time, these amazing things were happening that I was kind of documenting along the ways, and it definitely helps, I have to say. I wouldn't try and sort of force my beliefs on somebody else that was maybe going through a grieving process, but it definitely eased it. Yeah, to have this idea that there's that we definitely go on. Yeah.
Yeah, and that you were seeing evidence, your mom showing you that she's still listening to you, obviously, if
Yeah.
you're asking
So
for
I've just got
signs
to,
and she's showing those are very obvious signs to me. If she had the exact movie you were working on the sequel for, that's
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, no, yeah, that really was. So I've just got this furry animal just circling me at the moment.
Animals love my show. You heard my dogs earlier. They
Yeah.
love to join in every once in a while, and I think that's an interesting thing too. When you are an empathic person, and when you, I think, are more spiritual and high vibrating, animals do tend to attract, like you attract animals. I feel that way anyway.
Yeah, I can see that actually now you mention it. Yeah. Yeah, I've got a lot of them in my life lately. Yeah, other people's and yeah.
Yes, they like to send messages as well. And so, in your book, do you give any insight to if you're going through the spiritual awakening process, tips or
Yeah,
anything
absolutely.
helpful?
Yeah, I've put lots of meditations in there. I've since that's just been a in so many ways, meditation has really helped me so much. Just in the first place with the other story that I told you, and then I feel like it really is the key to mediumship. To again to be able I talk about it a lot, but and I'm not the only person that talks about this, but stepping back from your thoughts and sort of getting used to observing them and not getting caught up in the whole thing, and then sort of really getting in tune with that I call it the backseat driver or whatever you want to call it, the witness. And then you can sort of realize that that inner voice isn't necessarily attached to all of your thoughts. And then through mediumship, when something else comes in, at least this is the way it works for me, then I can tell the difference between, what's going on with me and this new voice that's come in. So yeah, I filled the book with meditations, actually both books, the second book too. And it's a progression, I suppose. And all I'm saying is what's worked for me. I feel like somewhat a little bit of a maverick, because in the UK especially, we have a very traditional spiritualist movement here. Um, so people have been practicing this for way before I stepped in, and just saying, "Hey, let's all be mediums." I've read a book about it. So I'm just sort of treading carefully. I don't want to, step on anyone's toes or suggest that I know that much about it. I'm just kind of documenting what's worked for me, and I would hope that if the reader was interested, that they would follow the same steps, and it should work for them too. Yeah, yeah,
I think the best part about the fact that, someone like you writing the book is that people realize and understand that they're not crazy and that they're
yeah.
not alone. There's someone else who has gone through this a similar experience, and that, you know, giving them tips and tools for how to work through it, I think is really important, because going through a spiritual awakening can feel like you're going crazy.
Yeah, I mean, especially again, just to go back to that sort of living in the now story, I've had a couple of people email me and said, thanks for writing that because they went through something similar. Um, Not in the same way as I kind of described it, but just feeling like they were just having like a full-blown 24/7 panic attack, and then sort of realizing later on that it was like a process that they sort of came out the other side with a different insight onto life, I guess. Yeah, a couple of people have come to me with that story, which is well, it's not really nice to hear because it's kind of everybody seems to be quite traumatized about it. But yeah, I wonder, because people sort of throw the term spiritual awakening around a lot, and I feel like at the end of the day, it's a good thing, but like you said, it's not necessarily the easiest
Mhm.
of rides when you really get hit with one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's confusing and you feel lost. And like you said, I think a lot of people probably go through depression and panic attacks because they just don't really understand what's happening. And it's hard because
Yeah.
it's not really the mainstream yet. I mean, we're getting more
Yeah.
in that way, but not yet.
That's true. And just to bring it to, I'm sort of just tying this into the books a little bit. The second book that I wrote, I did a lot of some research around shamanism and sort of ancient traditions and stuff like that. And one kind of interesting thing that I came across was that this was all to go through something like that was almost a rite of passage thousands of years ago. That you'd have like a tribe or a village, or I'm just sort of just generalizing here, but you'd have the person that people would consider a little bit odd, who would be the seer or something like that. And those people would typically go to the brink of madness and come back. And then they would be the people the person that somebody would go to for spiritual advice or all that kind of thing. I really made a mess of that, but you, you know what I mean.
It makes
I
sense to
mean,
me. I understood what you were saying. And yeah, I mean it's kind of similar today, except,
yeah.
not everyone shares their experiences either. I think, some people
Mm.
kind of suffer in silence that they're going through this, because it is true, like not everyone is accepting of, especially if they've been brought up in a very strict religious home.
Absolutely, yeah,
They
definitely.
don't want to
And
believe.
also, again, I've got to be sort of really careful here because I'm just not dismissing any mental illness at all. And maybe I did have a psychotic break. I don't know, but maybe a psychotic break could also be a spiritual an awakening. It's an odd one, but I was really on the brink, and it was for the most part of a year. And like I say, meditation, that just changed everything. Just one meditation. I just saw the benefits of it instantly. And then that just brought me back. Yeah, just repeating the same meditation every day. So to be honest, and with full disclosure, after I got better, I forgot about it. I didn't keep meditating. I just was like, great, I'm back. All right, I'll carry on now, and pick up where I left off.
Yeah.
But I found I couldn't. I felt, my ego had been smashed to pieces. I felt like a lot humbler. I felt a lot more respect about everything and everyone. Um, and then yeah, it's kind of come somewhat. I don't know if it's full circle yet, but my mum passing was really the catalyst to sort of go back to all of that and think, okay, yeah, maybe this is a thing that I need to pay more attention to. And I feel that finally, after nearly 50 years of never knowing what I wanted to do with my life, I feel like, oh, okay, this was it, right? I get it now. But yeah,
Interesting thing. I think a lot of people start to turn more towards their, purpose in life.
Mm,
And I think a lot of people mistakenly sometimes think purpose equals career. It doesn't always. Sometimes it's,
mm.
being of service to people.
I'm
Um,
definitely not getting rich from any of this, that's for sure. So yeah.
Now, did you get signs that you needed to write a book? Because I know that's one of the things that happened for me was I just kept getting this intuitive hit, like you need to write this down. And at first it was just, okay, you're going to write this down just to get it out, to heal yourself. And then it turned into something more than that.
It just felt like the natural thing to do at the time. I can't remember when I started it. I'm gonna say a couple of months after my mum passed, when I started looking into mediumship. And I walked into a spiritualist church one night and just watched a medium giving a demonstration to like a random congregation of people. And she came to me and pretty much just described my mum. And I must say the game changer was her accent changed. So this medium, she didn't know me. I just walked in there and she sort of very briefly described the state around my mum passing. And she had a very strong London Cockney accent. And then it changed to a very Northern English accent. And I was just like, okay, this is like I mean I'd gone there hoping to hear from my mom at the end of the day after reading a couple of books on mediumship, but that was as life-changing as all the other kind of things that happened around my mum passing. So yeah, that probably really was I probably started writing it then. I think I was like, okay, there's a lot of stuff going on here. I need to start, yeah, talking about it. But it felt like a natural process. Yeah. I mean, I've scribbled a few things down over the years, but I've never wrote a book. Yeah. And it just poured out. And then when I finished it, I felt like I'd learned so much about this whole sort of, I don't know what you would call it, movement or what have you, that I just wrote the second one straight off the back of that. So yeah.
And how does the second book differ from the first? What's the second book about?
The second one was really more about everything I'd learned over that first year. The first was more about me. The first one's more almost like autobiographical, or very much so actually. To just sort of put things in context. I've not gone into every single thing I did through my life, but anything that would sort of appear to have some sort of weird event attached to it, I kind of just like highlighted them, and there seemed to be a lot. And then yeah, the second one, it was kind of more about these sort of spiritual ideas. I hate to just keep using the word spiritual, but
Yeah.
these kind of ideas as a bigger collective. And then I was thinking, well, what would I like to know about? So I kind of dove into this whole thing about Celtic folklore and again shamanism and history of witchcraft. I started studying about studying a history of witchcraft in the Middle Ages through the University of Barcelona and just kind of just poured all into it and had a lot of fun with it. Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's really an important thing to get perspective on how different cultures throughout the years have treated people who have had gifts, because I think it's really interesting to see that, and also to see, I think, how we've evolved
Yeah.
as
Yeah,
people,
actually you just described it better than I did. Complete. That's pretty much what I tried to do with that section of the book at least. I learned so much. Especially about witchcraft actually in the Middle Ages. Over here, I'm just kind of looking at my notes because this is way too smart for me to remember off the top of my head. But yeah, I kind of went into this whole section and there's so much of it, of course in the States as well. But I just kind of focused over here about when people started talking about spirituality outside of a religious dogma, then they started getting burned at the stake, essentially. That and that's what I believe was essentially the start of sort of what the witchcraft as we know it. I don't know. I guess I can't say the modern age, but yeah, 1600s onwards and stuff like that. Yeah, but yeah. I mean, horrifying, and essentially anyone that would claim that they talk to dead people would be it. I'd be burned at the stake as well, I guess. So yeah, it's a crazy time. Yeah.
It is. And then today you get a TV show, right? Where you get to follow people
Yeah.
around and
Yeah. But yeah, one thing I came across as well was that so they had the Witchcraft Act in the UK or across Europe, but in the UK at least it was like essentially licensed people to go witch hunting, and kill witches. And one shocking thing I found out about that was that it wasn't abolished until 1951.
oh my gosh.
Nobody was,
Wow.
yeah, I mean nobody was obviously doing it at that point,
Right.
but yeah, somebody was like, oh, we probably should get rid of this. But at this point, yeah, like yeah, 1951, yeah, you could still go and burn a witch.
That's crazy. But we do compare. I taught English for a little while, and we would read The Crucible, and it was, an allegory about what was happening with the communist trials and McCarthy, and basically it was a witch hunt too. So that makes
Mm-mm.
sense that in the 1950s that kind of was, I'm sure there weren't people actually going out and chasing after real witches, but that those attitudes were still there.
Yeah, true. Yeah, true. Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? It wasn't, it's only 30 years before the 80s, but then again, it's only 50 years after the turn of the century. So it's yeah, crazy times.
Hmm. Very much so. But I think we've definitely evolved quite a bit. Um, if there are people out there listening who maybe think they're going through a spiritual awakening right now, maybe they're in that stage where they feel like they're going crazy or they're not sure what's happening, do you have any piece of advice or words of wisdom that you could give them in order
I
to
would,
help them?
yeah, I mean, sure, I would go straight to meditation immediately. If you're not, if you've never done it before or not used to it, I'm sure most of your listeners have. Guided meditations are like really helpful. I still use guided meditations, to just sort of cut out the clatter and just sort of get in that bubble of yourself and just be sort of I feel like it helped me get comfortable in my own skin again after not really being able to make much sense of it for a while. And it still does. Yeah, it still does, just to take that moment and just be present and connect with the moment of now, but not have the whole thing that I went through. But yeah, I feel like it's possible to sort of connect with that in a much more peaceful state. And just yeah, I feel like that's a real key. Yeah, definitely.
And you said that you have meditations in your book, is that right?
Yep, every few pages there's a meditation. I've started making guided meditations. I'm sort of dabbling with YouTube. I've not got that many followers there. And I've put a few guided meditations on there, but the actual process of recording them and all that stuff and putting music with them and everything, I need to get better at that. But yeah, I think there are plenty of meditations out there that are useful. But yeah, both books, Letting Glow and Glowing Deeper, they both have a meditation at the end of each chapter. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you for being here with us today. And, there's lots of great people who have guided meditations too. If anyone's just searching right now and just thinking, like, I need something today, I have some on my YouTube channel too. But definitely, if this is something that, you're listening to us and you sound like, this is me, I really need some help, his book is a great resource. It's Letting Glow, and then Glowing Deeper is going to be coming out soon. So I really want to thank you for being here with us today and sharing your story with us, because I think it's helpful for people to understand they're not alone and to really be able to relate to other people sharing the same experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me on again. Yeah, it was nice talking with you.
And now if anyone wants to buy your book or maybe they just want to follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, the books are available everywhere. If they don't physically have them in a bookstore, if people still do that, yeah, they're pretty much, Barnes and Noble, obviously Amazon. Yeah, they're available worldwide. The second one comes out on the 1st of February. But yeah, Letting Glow's been out since last April. And then me, I've got a website, philwebster.com, so it's Phil with two L's. And yeah, I'm happy to receive emails and if anybody wants to talk about any of the things we've talked about.
Awesome. And I'm going to have that in the show notes. So if you guys want to go to his website or you want to get to the book, it will be there for you. Thank you again so much for being here with us today and just sharing your story with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And I want to thank you guys for being here with us today, too. As always, if you like this podcast, please subscribe. Please leave a positive review from wherever you're listening. And the greatest compliment you can pay me is to share this podcast with anyone you think might benefit. I hope you guys have an amazing week. If you want to work with me, my website is in the show notes. And you can also join us on Patreon, where you can see the video of this interview and all of the other wonderful guests that we've had on this podcast. I hope you guys have an amazing week. I am sending you so much love and light, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.